everybody. Right, we are complete. So we are going to get moving, if that is okay. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to the session hosted by CSCS, Building Competence, Ensuring a Skilled Workforce across construction and the built environment. And thank you very much for choosing to join us this morning. I'm conscious there's a huge amount to choose on the programme, and you have to find your way up to the 4th floor, which, as Steve, I think you've just found out, is I think we've all passed the first test of getting here. I recognise quite a few people here in the audience, but for those I haven't yet met, my name is Suzannah Nichol, and I'm the Chief Executive of Build UK, the leading trade organisation for the construction industry. And you may recognise us from the site operating procedures during COVID, our work on payment, the Common Assessment Standard, maybe something you've heard of, or maybe Open Doors Week. Build UK is also a proud owner, along with other industry bodies in the trades unions, of the CSCS logo, and everything that sits behind that. And there is a lot behind that logo, which is perfectly positioned to support the whole construction sector as we navigate our way towards demonstrating that our industry is made up of skilled and competent people. I joined this industry when I was at school and began my career on site. And one of the first and most important lessons I learned was right at the heart of this industry is our people. And no matter how ambitious our plans are, how much we talk about projects, about housing, about infrastructure, about regeneration, none of it happens without skilled and competent people. Since the Grenfell Tower fire 9 years ago and the subsequent introduction of the Building Safety Act, the spotlight has rightly been on building safety, quality, and the competence of everyone involved across the whole supply chain. And we've moved from can you deliver this project to do you have the workforce with the right skills, knowledge, experience, and behaviours to specify, design, manufacture, construct, and maintain this building, this project. And that third step, and can you demonstrate it? So can you do it, and can you demonstrate it? And there is on the end of that, and will you actually do it when you're out on my project, whichever part you come into. And that's a massive shift and a really important one. And at the same time, we're also facing a very real need for more people with the right skills. So we've got those two pressures coming together. We expect, want, and need higher standards, and we need more people. Individually, they are quite challenging. Combined, well, maybe it's an opportunity. Maybe this is the catalyst that we need for a shift that is long overdue. And the question for us all, wherever you sit in this great big industry of ours, is what do we need to do to build a workforce that meets our needs in terms of numbers and competence that gives investors, clients, regulators, and the public confidence in all of us. And data and visibility is critical to this. And at the moment, I feel sometimes we're attempting to answer that question, what do we need to do, without a clear picture of who we have in our workforce, what skills they have, how competent they are, what are we missing, and what will we need in the future. And that's the focus of our session this morning, to explore how better workforce insight and data can help us, how it helps us raise standards, ensure we have the right people in the right occupations, and ultimately make smarter decisions at national, regional, and project level. And how CSCS Smart Check, how my CSCS could just be the key. And that brings me on to our panel here today, who are all on the front line of industry and in positions of influence where they really can make a difference. So I'm going to go down the line. We have Steve Rotherham, who's the Mayor of Liverpool City Region Combined Authority. And that's a place, Steve, very close to my heart, because I went to university in Liverpool, where I did my construction management degree. Fond memories of Liverpool. And with both a client and a regional perspective, where decisions about skills, investment and delivery all come together, Steve understands the value of building core skills and competence in the local community. He started out in construction as an apprentice bricklayer before achieving a master's degree from Liverpool Hope University. And Steve, it looks like both have served you well. I'm moving on to Mark Farmer, who I'm sure many of you recognise, one of the founders of CAST and a leading voice on the need for a long-term workforce planning. And he's been very clear on the rewards for all of us if we get this right. Mark's always been one for early starts. His first job was a milkman's assistant. And I've got a bit of a theory that people in construction often start work early mornings and outdoors. So a milkman's assistant, and I made the joke when he said that I'm not sure my daughter would even know what a milkman is, which I think probably shows you how the world has changed. He followed this, he didn't stay as a milkman's assistant, let's just get that clear. He had a successful career as a quantity surveyor, and I know you also value and understand, Mark, that ultimately a productive industry that makes more profit is the place we all want to get to. That's very much coming from Mark. And both Steve and Mark sit on the Construction Skills Mission Board. Then we have Louisa Finley, Chief Operating Officer at Kier Group, having worked your way through the ranks from that real front line of construction, a long way from her first job, which was washing out plant pots at our local garden centre. And Lou and I actually live quite close to each other, so I know the garden centre you've been at, Lou. You and your teams are on the front line with duty holder responsibilities to ensure you are employing competent people on your sites, on your projects, and you have that ultimate responsibility for the quality of what you build. You are right in that line of sight. And then we have Sean Kearns. Sean's the CSCS Group Chief Executive. You also started in a practical job that was outside as a window cleaner. So this would be quite a job here, I think, for you, Sean. He's now leading the work across the CSCS Alliance in improving how we understand and verify the different elements of competence. So what a panel, bringing experience from across the system, policy, delivery, data, and leadership. So I'm looking forward to hearing from them this morning. They may not have all the answers, but they'll certainly have some of them. And hopefully by the end of this session, we'll have a clear review on what needs to change, what's already working, and what we need to do next. Now, I vividly remember as a young site engineer and then a health and safety advisor out on site, checking those hard copy CSCS cards, climbing up into the cab of a piece of plant and asking them to show me their card. And that principle of confirming that someone else has verified you've got the appropriate training and qualifications stuck with me. Fast forward 30 years, and that's now an industry-wide connected digital system. Now, we're going to come to our panel shortly for questions. I've got a few, but we really want to hear from you, so hopefully you've come with some questions. If not, what you hear will inspire you to ask a few. But first, I'm going to hand over to you, Sean, to take us all through the core elements of the CSCS digital infrastructure.
Thanks, Suzannah. Great to see so many of you here to see us on the fourth floor. I was going to start about the elephant in the room, but there is a bigger one next door if you haven't seen it. As Suzannah kind of alluded to, we've come a long way as the card scheme in the 30-odd years that we've been operating. So we're not now just about the physical card. It's actually the digital infrastructure that's there in the background, and the byproduct of having that infrastructure that identifies Sean Kearns as the card holder, but the collective of us within this room as card holders, and the different skills that we have, is what we've been working on over the past few years to actually understand that we've been remiss in not actually doing more analysis in the cardholder information to understand that skills and competent workforce and those that need to be on a pathway to competence, particularly given the Building Safety Act's requirements. So the infrastructure that's in play that you and I would all know as a physical device, behind it there's now a digital passport element that identifies the additional skills and competence that you have, not just the qualifications that got you the card issued. And with that, there's also, in the same way as if you carry a passport to sunnier climes for your holidays or for business travel, that passport gains you access through a passport control process. And that background check to ensure that you're not on a apprehend list gets you off to your destination. Well, what we've done at the behest of industry over the last 5 years is made sure that the 37 different issuers of cards, you don't need to know that there are 37 different card issuing based upon the skills and occupations that the individual holds. You just need to know as an employer or a client that that card can be checked at site. And by checking that detail at site, we get insight as to what the skill mix looks like in and around, skills and competency mix looks like in and around the sites in and around the country. So we've gone very much from being a physical card to now having a digital infrastructure. So in order to demonstrate a skilled and competent workforce, we're very, very clear that there needs to be a digital skills passport that the individual is responsible for updating and maintaining. So whilst core qualifications may not change, the CPD, in order to maintain currency, do change and do need to be updated, and therefore the employers and clients need to be assured that the individuals being deployed within their sites are skilled and competent for the work that they're being asked to do within that site context. And so within the skills in the card environment, what we've done is we've built the My CSCS app. So in the same way as I'm pretty sure every one of you in here has got a bank card, but the majority of you will probably be using the banking app for transactions, and therefore that card now links to a back-end app where the individual has the opportunity to update more around their skills and competence as opposed to just their core qualifications. And from that app, it means it's always in the wallet, whether it's in the digital wallet or physical. And as I said, by having those two tools do, as from a carding perspective, what that allows us to do is to now start to share with industry a better understanding of what that geographic mix looks like across the whole of the UK. Not just limited to England and regions, but on a full UK mix basis. And one of the myths that we continually have heard is we've got an ageing demographic. Yes, we've got an ageing demographic in the higher skilled workforce, but that is no different than any other industry. What we do have, as you can see from this data, is a reasonable distribution of card holders, acknowledging that card holding is predominantly in the commercial and infrastructure sector, but the infrastructure that is deployed by CSCS is deployable today, this afternoon, within an RMI and domestic sector, because the functionality is app-based, phone-based, and works on a simple check process. It also works on an API check, which is where the commercial and infrastructure partners use it because they can check at scale. So the demographic is reasonably distributed. what the data is showing us, though, is that green splodge on this part of the pie would indicate that they're not at a skilled threshold. Almost 50% of all card holding is at a labourer card level 1. And therefore, if we're trying to raise the skills and competence of our workforce, we've got 50% below competence threshold and not necessarily evidencing that they're on a training pathway. So the red segment on there are those that are evidencing that they're on a training pathway. So one of the elements with industry that we're working on over the next 2 years is seeing a shift from 50% in the green category into 25% into the red category. At the moment, that's only 10%. So we're in Leeds. So wanted to try and illustrate what some of the regional information that is now available to us off of the carding base. So in the Yorkshire and Lancashire area, so within an hour drive time of Leeds, you can see the proportion of those on an unskilled basis compared to the national picture is slightly smaller. Age demographic is similar. Training mix smaller than the national picture. We've got Steve from Liverpool on the panel, so it would be remiss of me not to have some data re Liverpool, where the skill mix in Liverpool is slightly higher from an unskilled perspective to the national picture, and therefore one of the things we're talking with colleagues within the city region is how we get that more proportionate to the skills mix. In the middle. That there'll be a still being classified either occupation or skills level, because the data isn't clean. Okay. So from our carding data, we've now got a picture nationally of what the carding skill mix looks like across the UK. But as I said earlier, by having the passport control system, SmartCheck, that the CSCS group have invested in as for industry, we've now got a tool that enables all of employers and therefore clients to specify that employers on their contracts are using SmartCheck. What it gives then to clients and employers is an understanding of what the skill mix looks like within their contract and their site. We only deployed this 2 years ago, so this is a maturing data set. And this is the first time we've really published some of the outputs of this maturing data set. But what this is indicating is that of the 2.4 million live cards, almost 1.5 million of them have been checked through the SmartCheck process. And therefore, part of our ask to employers and clients is to specify the use of SmartCheck, because then we'll get an understanding of who's active and actively seeking to be deployed versus being a card holder and not active within the industry. And if we're trying to raise not just skills and competence, but if we're trying to deal with shortages within the sector, understanding who's actively trained but not actively deployed becomes a target group to actually target to get active within the industry. So what this mix is showing is that of the 1.5 million cards that have been checked, just over 500,000 of them are Build UK members checks. And the Build UK mix has a higher skilled proportion of workers than all checks. And so whilst we've got, from the earlier slides, about 50% of all cards issued unskilled, active workforce, it would appear, are more aligned to the skills mix we would expect across industry, where it's 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 in a labourer role versus in a skilled role. But if we're trying to raise skills and competency across the workforce, we would expect over the next 5 years that blue quadrant should grow, and in the next 2 years we would want to see that red quadrant of in training be the major growth pattern for the industry. And this data gives that early insight as to whether we're having that effect. So that's the Build UK mix that I was talking about. Sorry, I'm looking at the right-hand screen. I should be looking at the left one. So that's what I was just talking about. And then from a Kia perspective, as a Build UK member, and Lou being on the panel, you can see that Kia's profile actually is nearer the 1 in 4 unskilled rather than the 1 in 3 that we see as a mix across industry. In that the labourers within your checking mix is more proportionate to what we would expect across site, and almost 50% are in a skilled capacity. So the data that I've been sharing is a composite of the 37 licensed card schemes. So to put those 37 into context, I can bet not everybody in the room in here banks with the same bank. There'll be a plethora of bank cards in each of our pockets, but I can guarantee that they'll have one of 2 logos on them. They'll either have a Visa logo or they'll have a MasterCard logo. And what the 37 CSCS logo cards are the equivalent of a Visa or MasterCard. So if it's got the CSCS logo on the card, it's part of that verified group. So that's part of the endorsement piece. If it doesn't have the CSCS logo on it, it's not met threshold. So the byproduct of us working as a collective means that we've now got collective insights to be able to share to yourselves and the rest of industry on workforce profiling. And then the final couple of slides, back to Steve's area, and this time looking at it from an hour drive time of Liverpool. So this is the whole population in an hour's drive of Liverpool City region, where there's 110, just over 110,000 skilled workers with cards. There are obviously other workers, but will not be carded. If everybody in that region were carded, we would have an understanding of where we've got an understanding of real shortages. We anticipate that the actual workforce numbers are likely to be around 160 to 170,000 individuals. So 60 to 70,000 people not carded because they're working domestically or on RMI. However, if we look at in that same region at those under 25, and this picture I could look in any part of the country other than Scotland. This is one of our fundamental issues, is that more than 2/3 of individuals under 25 are on a labourer card and therefore have skills to a level 1 only, which does not necessarily make them site ready. And that's one of the challenges we've all got as clients and employers and training providers in making sure that they're on the right steps to employment. And I think that kind of summarises the data that we've got available now through the CSCS group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean. Lou and I are going to polish our halos for being name-checked in a positive light, which was very kind of you. And Steve, you've got an interesting challenge there, I think, to see how many people, construction workers in Liverpool, we can get cards, because then we can do something with them. And thanks, Sean, for bringing us all up to speed. I think I sit there and go, the power of data that we have in our industry, but we have to use it. But behind that, to get that data, we've all got to get behind where we get that data from. So there's a real joined-up approach from everybody required, and everybody has a part to play. I always say construction's a team game. So wherever you sit in the supply chain, whatever the size of your organisation, you have a massive part to play in making the industry more productive, more efficient, and go faster, because that ultimately benefits us all. And this is all really timely as well, because for once the construction industry is ahead of the curve. You may have seen the government's asking sectors if they would support a digital skills passport, and Mark, you will know more about this than pretty much any of us. And our answer is we absolutely believe in it, so we're a really good, strong foundation to build on. Right, I'm seeing our panel have sat there, all been name-checked, so now it's time for us all to do a bit of work. So my first question, I'm going to come down the panel, so Steve, I'm going to come to you first. Kind of positioning where we are with competence. I think before the Grenfell Tower fire, as an industry, I think we would have all talked about, yeah, we've got training, we've got competent people, they know what they're doing, we've got qualifications. But we all learned through the inquiry and subsequent reports, we need to do much more. So Steve, then Louisa, and then Mark. From where you sit, do you see a before and after view and understanding of competence and accountability in terms of delivery? So Stephen, if I can come to you first.
I think there's a difference between competence standards and regulations. I think we're much more aware that during the construction process that all factors need to be considered, and they were in regard to the regulations at the time, but they weren't implemented, and this is why CSCS could potentially be an important factor. And that is, you know, from my background, and by the way, I don't think I've ever been on a panel where, as a young kid, I had the best job out of the four of us on the panel, washing pots, washing windows, and delivering milk. So my parents would be so proud of me if they were here now. So where we need to get to is to better understand some of the data. And that's why it is important. The data sets are important. But what it identifies is that there are a lot of hidden people in the industry, and they're the ones who might not be aware of updated standards and regulations. From the Liverpool City region, and I can tell you we've done a really deep dive on this, we know that we haven't got an awful lot of tier one contractors. So what happens is companies take young people on, they get them to MVQ level 1, they're doing an MVQ level 2, but then the company can't allow them or doesn't want to allow them to do a day release because they need them on site to do something, and so they don't achieve the qualification. But they've got lots of the competencies, but they haven't got the qualification, therefore it's not on the CSCS card. We need, as a sector, to be doing far better than we currently are. We've got people who just need a little bump up. Now, that's what we've come together to do, and the Construction Skills Mission Board, which was launched by Angela Rayner when she was the Deputy Prime Minister, is a way to do that. We are piloting something in the Liverpool City region that links all of these different bits together And basically it's a workforce perspective of construction, because whilst we need 100,000, isn't it, a year with the shortfalls that we've got, actually if we want to do the stuff that we'd really like to do, that's not nearly enough people. If we're going to build 1.5 million homes, as we had as a target, and we're not getting anywhere close to that, I'll tell you, our proportion of that was 6,606 homes per year. It's 50% more than we've ever done. We're doing better than we used to do, but we're not going to hit 6,606. What's going to happen with the infrastructure projects that we're talking about, and the new train stations which need construction workers? What happens with the new roads that we're doing, the hospitals, the doctor surgeries, the huge number of regeneration projects outside of house building that we're involved in? We just haven't got people with the right CSCS competence, but may well have a lot of people who've got skills that we need, who just need that last little push over the line so that we can get them CSCS carded. And there's a whole part of the industry that's not included in any of your stuff, and that's what happens. Look, when you phone somebody to do, you know, your extension, nobody asks if they got a CSCS card. But I remember when it used to be, before it was gas safe, it was Corgi, wasn't it? And my mum phoned up to get her boiler done. And I said, Mum, what have you done? I would have done, you know, I know some people and all that. She said, it's all right, he's Corgi registered. So it did stick in the memory. We need people who get those extensions done to be thinking about, is this person competent? And the analogy that I always draw is, would you want somebody who's a pilot on your aircraft to be nearly competent? No, so why do we accept it in other things? Or a doctor, that's not bad, but he's not quite competent. So that's why it's such an important standard for us to achieve.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Lou. And I think the power of the data we've got here is demonstrating those gaps. So it's starting to give us those questions. How do we get those on the edges in, and then the people who aren't even on the edges? Lou, Louisa, I'm going to come to you next in terms of your view, in terms of, I guess, the industry's view of competence before Grenfell, after Grenfell, or any of the challenges you're seeing right now.
So I think before Grenfell, we sort of relied a lot on... There? Is that better? I thought I was loud enough anyway. So I think before Grenfell, we relied a lot on CVs. I think we believed we had quite a competent workforce. We did have CSCS cards. And I think Grenfell allowed us to shine a spotlight on the reality. And the other piece it did was, it was not just about, have you done it historically? It was, have you kept up to date? Do you understand what changes have happened? So it was the skills, the knowledge, experience is important. But behaviours are really, really important too. And I just don't want to leave those behind. And so we looked quite inwardly, and we said, right, how can we firstly support our own people to ensure that they're really competent to deliver the fantastic projects we're allowed to do? But then how can we work with, you know, our supply chain to really allow people on our site, somebody turns up, they have the right card, but they then have time to check they're set to work safely, and they have the right behaviours to deliver on time, to budget, supporting other people in their teams really safely, which I will go on about, and to that absolutely brilliant quality. Because I think something we forget about in the construction industry too much is how professional we really are. You know, what we actually deliver day in, day out for pretty small margins, and I will say that are changing lives, be that, you know, the lives of people we train, the lives of people who come into our buildings. So yes, I think sadly, Grenfell, however horrendous it was, made us really put a spotlight on what we were doing, challenged whether we really did have that competent workforce, and has given us, and this data helps enormously, but gives us the insight to say, where do we need to concentrate to ensure moving forward we can deliver the fantastic pipeline we're now getting visibility of. So, yeah.
Beautiful put, Louisa. Thank you very much. And you raised something in there, and you talk about your people because you employ them. You're very close to the supply chain. I think key is also we can get people as competent as we like, but they then need the right environment in which to work. It's no good training them brilliantly and then coming out and finding they can't deliver the required standards because the site's not ready, equipment's not available, they're being put under pressure to do things that mean they can't deliver that quality. Mark, you're quite close to this with all your workforce planning proposals, and you're working with Steve then. So what's your view?
So I echo a lot of the sentiment that Grenfell effectively shone a light on an issue that I think deep down, many of us in industry probably suspected was a bit of an Achilles heel, and I would characterise it as variable competency. In some instances, we have fantastic people doing a great job, absolutely nailing it in terms of what they're being asked to do, and they can absolutely perform to role, but we also have risks and the reality that certain people are not competent to do the role they're performing. And Grenfell, I think, really brought that to the fore. It also was a bit of an eye-opener, not just in terms of individual worker competency, but the system within which we operate. And I think that's the key thing we can't forget here. We have a competency issue in industry and a competency deficit, potentially, if you take it as a sort of net average position, but we have a system failure as well. And clearly that's something that needs to be addressed, as well as actually raising the competency bar for the industry. I would also just reinforce the point that I think it's very easy to characterise the competency debate as being one about site tradespeople, and being, clearly there's a lot of focus on post-Grenfell around installers on site, and that clearly is an area of real focus, and it's really relevant for CSCS in terms of their carded workforce cohort. But this is much broader than that. I'm an advocate for digital competency passporting across the whole workforce, and that includes the professional and technical cohort, because actually the issues start with clients in many respects, around how clients set up their jobs and brief the team, advisors that are then advising those clients, and the whole process of design, procurement, and the handover into construction management and delivery. So this is a broader piece that we need to get to grips with, and I'm very much of the view that if we're going to introduce a sort of a competency passporting platform, it needs to be holistic. It needs to be right across the piece. It aligns with lots of the government attention at the moment around the single construction regulator agenda. There's a construction professions call for evidence just out that is really all the stars are aligning towards us thinking differently about the quality of the workforce. And I think, I'm also very conscious our industry is being traditionally quite low barrier to entry, and that's often be seen as a good thing, because we create opportunities for a very broad range of people coming into our industry and creating great careers. And we don't want to lose that. We just want to make sure that it's a quality and standards-led approach, that everyone is able to do the job they're being paid to do.
It's team construction, as you say, isn't it? We are all in this together. The competence throughout that whole, everybody involved is absolutely key. Well, you've got the mic there, Mark. You've consistently highlighted the opportunities presented by a credible workforce plan. Can you explain what you mean by a workforce plan, what it might look like and how it will make a difference?
Yeah, so everything that Sean spoke about earlier, and the whole CSCS digital data platform, is one part of what I see as a bigger picture. So workforce planning is effectively supply and demand planning for the workforce. So that is understanding who we've got in the industry, the inventory of the workforce, if you like, not just headcount, but age, geography, and actually not just qualifications. So I think there's a further evolution of this, which is actually breaking the qualifications back into competency. And we're on a journey of translating all of the qualifications in our industry into SCEB, skills, knowledge, experience, behaviour frameworks, which should help that happen. So the currency of digital competency passporting is individual competencies. But that creates an inventory of the workforce, which tells you the as-is position around supply. The problem is that in isolation isn't workforce planning. All we're doing is we work out how many people we've got. How many people we've got has got to respond to the demand for construction employment. So for me, the other bit of the equation, which is the demand side of this, is the pipeline of projects. We need to have a much more sophisticated way of being able to depict what's laid out in front of the industry around work. And, that's a public sector challenge. So, quite a good steps towards improving that through things like the NISTA pipeline that have been in the second year publication. That NISTA pipeline needs to become real. There's no point just saying you're going to do something. Government have to commit to it and spend, and that has to translate into orders, because those orders then create the environment where employment happens. So then you're into a world of matching supply and demand. And in turn, it has an implication on provision, HEFE, around the new talent pipeline coming in, because from that supply and demand matching, you're able to work out where there might be surpluses, where we need to have a reskill pivot, or there might be shortages, where we need more people coming in to fill the gaps. But this is a very dynamic equation. It's all data-led. It's a build on what we've heard Sean talk about on the supply side, but we need to have much more information around the pipeline that can be presented in front of industry so they understand where the shortages are and where they can make investment in skills and training and ultimately employment. So that's my utopian vision of workforce planning.
Share your utopian vision, Mark, and beautifully explained. Thank you very much. Steve, I'm coming back to you. We've talked a lot about competence, about value, and I often see in the industry people saying, well, I don't want a card. I took my NVQ 30 years ago. What's wrong with it? You must see in your community the impact of lifelong skills and qualifications and how important it is. What difference does being competent make to somebody's career and their life prospects?
Well, I think the first thing is that one of the reasons that CSCS was introduced at the beginning was there's a direct correlation between people who aren't competent and accidents on site. And we were still having far too many people who were killed on building sites, and one's too many. It's gone down, but we've had spikes where we have to question the reason why those things are happening. And that was why I gave it right at the very beginning my wholehearted support. So the proof of competence really is a ticket, isn't it? It's a way of proving that you should be allowed onto a site. And what we're trying to do is by having something that clearly identifies what your qualification levels are, that then means you can move to the next stage. And just because you start on an NVQ level 1, that shouldn't be the end of it. I do believe in lifelong learning. So, I think we started on NVQ level 2. I was what was called a CITB award holder in the days. And then the war came, and but it was very different then, because we did used to invest through the CITB into trying to get people at least some tool skills to go on site. And now obviously that's what the CSCS does. It proves that you've got those skills to go on a site. And there's loads and loads of ways in which you might start on something in construction and end up somewhere completely different. I think the other thing it does with the data that we've got, we can identify how many types of people are coming into the sector. And we still have a massive problem with underrepresentation from women. And if you have a look at the trades that women are more likely to take up, it's not some of the traditional ones. It's not your scaffolding or your bricklaying or that type of stuff. And it's not that women are less competent. It's that we've got an awful lot of work still to do on trying to get it away from it's just men in dirty boots type stuff. And there are lots and lots of schemes doing that. So again, what we can do is identify where there's more likelihood of women wanting to enter the sector and put more courses on around that so that people can get qualified to get the CSCS card to go and work on site. And then you see a lot of women who are in the more sort of technical and professional professions. And that's great as well, because they're the role models, I think, that we can use to try and get a more diverse workforce. Because genuinely, if we don't, the industry, it'll really suffer. It's not going to die, because there's always going to be construction, but it really suffer because we're not attracting enough people into it, and we're not attracting enough people who are then in the sector to sustain their qualifications in the long run. So I think there's a huge amount of work for us to do to try and sell it. Can I just say, I work for something called the Learning and Skills Council, which people know. It's like the Skills Funding Council now type thing. And we were talking about the same things 30 years ago that we're still talking about today. And it does frustrate me. And I've expressed my frustrations once or twice on the Skills Mission Board and upset a few people because I'm not prepared to be part of a talking shop. So what we've actually got is something tangible from these meetings around workforce development. You know, what does it actually mean? How can we get not just individuals, but companies geared up to deliver in a different way? How can we better license people? How can we preempt what's going to happen in the next sort of 2 or 3 years so that we can work backwards on the pipeline and get those people who can then seamlessly move into the types of jobs that we're creating? There's only devolution that can help in that respect, and that's why it's really important that we do work with yourselves and others, because we'll have a lot of the responsibilities. We have our own data as well, and it'd be interesting, wouldn't it, when you segment that data to see whether there are some similarities or whether what we've got is showing a difference to what you've already got. And again, that's one of the things through the Workforce Development Unit that we are already geared up to deliver.
I think we could probably talk all day about this issue. We're covering a whole range of issues. And we talk about at Build UK the journey from education into employment, where you start and how you progress. I'm conscious we promised our audience some questions, so I'm going to head back to the front. I think, Alan, you probably want this back. And open it up to questions. What's really helpful is if you wait for the mic, speak nice and clearly into it. And if you could say who you are, what's your name and where you're from? I promise we won't blind date you up with somebody. And ask your question if it's to a particular panel member. If not, I'll allocate it.
Perfect. Thank you. Really interesting panel. It's Alex Gosney from Nichol. So our data shows that probably over half of the workforce are self-employed, and with increasing national insurance and other legislation changes like the Employment Rights Act, we probably see that increasing. So my question is more around the competency of bringing people into employment and how we bring competent organisations to actually attract workers. And just if there's any thoughts on the panel around how we make sure that self-employed people are represented in these numbers.
I'm looking at you, Louisa, as the employer of people on the panel. Do you have any thoughts?
I think there's a whole industry piece to attract everybody into the industry, and it's to remove barriers that aren't necessary. So, you know, with a number of the things that have happened lately to make it more complicated for people to enter, we've got to break those down. So with our supply chain, we know that we have a number of self-employed people. That doesn't mean that they're not allowed on sites, but they still need to improve competence. Was there something specific you're seeing as a challenge in that space?
I think it's more around the bar for attraction. So I think in a lot of the work we do, we see maybe some practices that we wouldn't say are market leading in terms of how the workforce is actually engaged in that initial onboarding process. So they might not have a contract, they might not have any conditions, you know, that type of environment. Do we need to create a standard that can be recognised for organisations to meet to in terms of actually onboarding and employing individuals?
Well, I think absolutely. So, and I'm sitting in a position where that is a requirement of people that are on our supply chain to have those good practices. But that's quite a privileged position to be able to demand that. So how can we make that more than just a big major contractor able to say to a fantastic and very diverse supply chain, these are the minimum standards that we expect you to, recruit, retain and attract people and look after them. And we do audit it as well, because Susie made such a good point. We want people to come and work hard, go home tired, go home safely, having produced a fantastic product. And we need competent people to do that. And the fact that you're self-employed, it should not be a barrier to come and do those roles.
Steve, I'm conscious you're very popular today, aren't you? So I don't know if you want to say anything, final words, and then we can release you, and we've got 2 more questions.
Yeah, as somebody who was self-employed, I understand the concerns. I think the real problem for the industry is around bogus self-employment, and that still needs to be tackled if we're truly to ensure that the Exchequer recognises that construction is a sector that is worth investing in. So that's one of the things, and umbrella companies, for instance, and all of that. Yeah, we need to do an awful lot more. And to tell you the truth, I think I'm with Rachel later on. This is a couple of the things that I'm going to say, because that tidies things up. And also, it stifles competitiveness if you're putting in a genuine bid and somebody's coming in and they're doing stuff on it. But also, it's normally the way in which corners are cut is by taking more risk. That's the last thing that we want. We don't want people to be injured, as you say, and we want people to go home safely. So I think there's a load of issues. I just finished by saying that I think CSCS is not just a leader in the likes of the construction sector, but it is a model that I think will be used in other areas. And for those particular areas around competency, where we wouldn't want somebody, perhaps in the care sector, I'll give you an example. Why would we want somebody to look after our loved ones, our mums and dads or grandmas and granddads who can't prove their competence? And we've seen the result of that. So I think it's something that can be rolled out far, far beyond just construction.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. And if you can pass on the challenge of national insurance contributions to the Employment Rights Act to Rachel when you see it, that would be much appreciated. Fantastic. Add that in. Thank you very much. Julie White, you've got your hand up, and then this gentleman here.
Thank you. Hi, Julie White from Drill and Soaring. We're a very specialised sector in the construction industry, concrete cutting and drilling and soaring. And as I see, I'm in the Drilling and Soaring Association. They're one of your alliances. So we're living and breathing this. We're very highly skilled. We're very highly trained as an industry. So my question is, have you got more people following you, flying the banner? Do you need more? What can we do to help?
Thanks, Julie. The data that you've seen today is obviously from on the smart check side is of those employers and clients that are specifying the use of smart check. If all employers were using smart check and integrating to smart check to their back end systems, because generally it's an API related check, we would then have a richer picture of understanding who is deployed, whether they're self-employed or employed through a micro business or a large business within this sector. We'd understand what the skill mix really is. So our ask to employers and clients is specify the use of smart check, because you'll get the insight back in your local programs as to what your mix looks like locally by smart check being used in the background.
Got to be in it to win it. We have got one more question. If you could be super quick, now I've let you in, and well, it depends what it is how super quick the panel's going to be, and then I'll wrap up.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Rudy. I'm a councillor in Lewisham, a Green Party councillor. We've just taken control of the council there last week. We've set an agenda of building 1,000 homes for social rent, and we really want that target to translate into concrete jobs and growth in the construction sector. Mark, I was really interested in what you were saying about supply and demand planning and translating experience into compliance. So I was wondering what your advice was to local authorities so we can tie a skills strategy to our house building objectives.
So for me, it starts probably in the London context, it will be all about collaboration. So I'm very conscious, and having done lots of work in London, that sometimes skills agendas are constrained by thinking at a local authority level, and the skills market, the skills supply is regional. So it's London-wide, it's actually beyond London as well. So I would certainly encourage the idea of joined-up thinking, so even just with adjacent local authorities to Lewisham, but really in a pan-London basis. I can see Beth here in the audience from GLA, so there's a lot of work happening at the moment out of City Hall, which is really positive around trying to actually understand what that collaboration journey looks like, brokerage, trying to connect supply and demand at a city level in London. And it's not exclusive, there's other stuff happening, as Steve has said, in Liverpool as well, and other places. So it's more about thinking about the bigger picture, I would suggest, because that in turn will benefit Lewisham, but the bigger picture as well.
You've got to be super quick.
I'm going to be super quick. If I showed Liverpool under 25, 66%, London area 75% unskilled card holders. So if we're trying to put young people on the right pathway, London has the highest mix of unskilled workers. They may be skilled, so they may be on the wrong card. So let's get the right card. From a local perspective, Section 106 agreements, make sure within your Section 106 agreements you're specifying cards are part of the mix, because you'll get that insight back to the outputs of your programs.
And I'm happy to have a follow-up conversation about programs that will look after your apprenticeships through the whole supply chain, that deliver a 90% success rate in retention, rather than the national average success rate of achievement rate on construction apprenticeships is about 54%, 53, 54. We can deliver 90%, but you have to think differently, and as you say, collaboratively, and not just about what happens locally. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for the questions from the audience. As I say, we could have gone on for some time. I'm my killer question is going to be, maybe now is the time to start mandating some of this. So getting it in your agreements, but start thinking about how it becomes the norm for every client and every contractor, in line with the CLC recommendation, which is to specify and use the CSCS cards. Thank you very much. I think the discussion's reinforced that everyone's committed to doing something different, to improving those level of competence. Steve's example of a pilot, mine's always a midwife. Do I want somebody who's competent, who's delivered a few babies, or somebody who's done an online course? I know which one I would rather choose. We should be applying the same principle to construction. One thing that I really value about CSCS, it's owned by the industry. Any money goes back into the industry. We sell too much of our knowledge, too much of our data to commercial interests in the industry, and then my members, contractors, you as clients end up buying it back. I don't think that's very smart. Investing in CSCS is investing within the industry, which makes us all better. So thank you to our panel members, Steve Rotherham, Mark Farmer, Louisa Finley and Sean. Thank you all very much. Thank you to CSCS for sponsoring the event.